Hi, Tia Monet here and Miss Cardinal. Thanks so much for joining in. I, as promised, am going to talk a little bit about my first pageant experience as a 21-year-old woman. And I'm hoping that if you're watching this right now, that and you're about to do a local or compete in your first pageant, that you won't make some of the mistakes that I made, and you might just have a little more confidence in the fact that it's all supposed to be fun, and it really is fun, even though it's so stressful the day of. It's a lot of fun. So my first pageant experience, here we go. Okay, so I'm gonna start with the first mistake that I made, and that was by registering for this pageant with a week and a half to prepare. Please don't do that, ever. Do not make the mistake that I made. I think it might be because I'm an Aries or I don't know what, but I just like to do spontaneous things sometimes, and I just like to spice up my life in every which way. And that was what I chose to do by just registering for this pageant. I wouldn't suggest that, nor would I ever do that ever again. It's just simply not enough time to prepare. It's not. And it's not gonna put you in the best position to win. And yeah, that's it. You're not gonna be fully prepared to do everything you have to do. And paperwork, getting that in on time is so important. It's so important. A lot of times they randomly select who's going to be placed in what number, like contestant number. Sometimes they do it by the time that you turn in your paperwork. And a couple times, especially at my first pageant, I was the first contestant. And I also happened to get my paperwork in last. Coincidence? Maybe, but all I know is you don't want to be first at your first ever pageant, because I was like, well, where do I walk? Where do I go? It was hard. And I'm thankful that we had a run through to tell us where to walk and what to do and where to go. But being that it's your first time and the run through was a couple hours before the show, no, it was not enough. I was not ready. I was not prepared. No. Well, anyway, first pageant that I did, the cost, like I said in the last video, was $100. So I got around that by simply just asking 4 people that I knew, would be supportive for $25. That took care of my entry fee. For a dress, my mentor, who was Mrs. Georgia 2014 and Mrs. North Carolina International, she has a vault of dresses and gowns. So thankfully she let me borrow one, which was great and it was beautiful. Only downside to that is it wasn't a dress that was tailor-made for me. And I feel like that has some bearing on how you feel in the dress and how you walk in it. If you know oh, this is for me, this is mine, you kind of walk differently, just slightly. But me and her, we had the same stature. We're both petite women, but we just had different measurements like most people in the world do, which is fine. Just know that for your first local, it's okay. But if that's something that matters to you, then I would take that into consideration. However, on the flip side, there are many success stories of people who succeeded and won in their competitions in used gowns. Just do some research and you'll see. So whatever works for you, if that's not that important to you, I would absolutely try and borrow one. But if how it fits and how snug it is on you, and if it's curved, fits your curves and your size, if that's really important, which ended up being to me when I ended up getting my own gown and long gowns, then I would also take that into consideration and know that that's not something that can happen in a week. The second reason why you shouldn't ever do that in a week. I'm telling you, I wouldn't, if I could go back, I would not have done that. I would just have waited to the next one and tried to prepare a little better. But it's in the past, and now I can talk about it and encourage other people not to do that. Next, I got there, it was really early because the private interview was always first before the actual on-stage portion of the show. So they try and get the private interview out the way first. At least I know that's how it is with the Miss America organization in Miss Virginia. So I got there early, and I had also borrowed an interview dress, but there are ways to find very reasonably priced interview dresses that look stellar. We'll talk about that later. I borrowed an interview dress, and my mentor, she had told me, she said, whatever you do, don't wear dangly earrings to your interview and don't wear any jewelry. I had on the thinnest little necklace, and I had on earrings that were just a little bit dangly, just a tiny bit. Whew, whew, she went in on me. And she said, well, that's probably one of the reasons why you didn't win. And it might be, but I know that I didn't win because I wasn't ready to win. And that will be its own episode in this series, but it starts up here, and then it starts in here, in your heart too. Well, maybe it starts in your heart, and then it goes to your mind. I don't know, but it's important that you know that you're ready to win and that you're fit to do this job, because it simply is a job interview. On the note of it being a job interview, I wouldn't wear overly dangly earrings, nor would I wear like a lot of like jewelry to an interview anyway, so I probably shouldn't have worn that to that competition interview either, and I didn't subsequently after that. So just keep that in mind, especially when considering if you're going for a dress or a skirt, the length of it, how it's cut, the slits, what have you. It's really an intense job interview. It is. In that private interview, I was an accomplished public speaker. I was a mass communications major, and I took a lot of public speaking classes so I could excel in that area, which is why I went into the interview, although extremely, extremely nervous because I didn't know what to expect. I was confident in myself and my abilities, which is a good thing to be. Just play to your qualifying factors when you're going to something for the first time. Know what you're good at, what you're great at, and what you bring to the table, and I would accentuate those things to the heavens, because when you do that, then you can't focus too much on your flaws. You should be focused on what you got going for you, and that's good. Focus on your flaws in your off time, when you're not in show mode. When you're in show mode, it's all my good qualities now, and I'm accentuating and highlighting them. I digress. Once I went to that interview, it was intense. It was so intense, and I realized that one of my shortcomings was expecting the unexpected. I tell you, not in my first pageant, but in another pageant that I did, I was asked in the private interview what the national debt was. And I watched the news kind of while I was getting ready and preparing, but I did not know the national debt, and maybe the winner did. It really comes down to things like that, and it's really good. Like, now I know the national debt, but then I didn't, and I probably should have. It was probably on a couple headlines that month before the competition. Who knows? Now I know, But other than that, you have a platform. If you're doing, this organization, and you have hobbies and just things that are interesting and different about you, I would just know everything that you put on your paperwork. I would know it. Knowing it and knowing yourself like the back of your hand is important, because they will probably ask you about any and everything that's on that paper, and then based on what you say, then they'll ask you more questions. So knowing that is like level 1, and that's like where you should start. So I went to an HBCU, for example, and I was not expecting them. I was expecting to ask me about my experience at an HBCU, because it is different in this scene, which I'm hoping that might change in the future. Whatever. So I went to an HBCU. They asked me how I would plan to put HBCUs on the map. I never thought about how I would put HBCUs on the map. To be honest, I thought they were already on the map. So of course I tried to flub an answer, but now that actually made me think, and I actually thought about, I'm doing initiatives and putting them on my campus, which could consequently put them on the map. Don't overthink stuff while you're in an interview. Just think about everything that you're doing. And I'm sure you're gonna do stuff at your school or in your locale, in your community, and use that to your advantage. Just know what you're doing, know where you're doing it, and know who it's helping, and you're gonna put everybody on the map that needs to be on the map. Don't overthink stuff like I did, okay? Okay. Now, I do want to slide in there that I made a lot of new friends who became so supportive of me and were so friendly and so helpful. And I'm so excited about that. And I actually still keep in contact with those people today. And it's crazy because the two girls that beat me in the first pageant and we became friends, I ended up, when I won the third local that I competed in, now we're all competing again. It's Virginia, so I'm really excited to see them again. And yeah, they were very supportive of me this whole way. So you're gonna make some really, really good friends who have similar interests and are like-minded like you are, and it's great. Like-minded in different ways, of course, but like-minded. You all like to do pageants and do community service and just do something great and something bigger than yourself, and that's important, moving on to the on-stage portion. Now, I will tell you, the on-stage part of the whole pageant is the part that made me want to crawl under a rock. I tell you. For my on-stage question, I was asked, if I were the title holder, how would I answer a political question? Well, I opted to say I wouldn't answer. And that was it. And when I tell you it was crickets, it already feels like when you're on that stage and it's just you, it's already been like 5 hours if you're silent for a second. It was 10 hours and it was so awkward. The MC, the hostess, she didn't even know what to do. She didn't know what to say. The crowd didn't know whether to clap or not. And that's because I would highly advise you that whenever you do an interview on stage or private, make your answers more than a phrase or a word, a one-liner. It needs to be more than that. It has to have substance. I will tell you, especially when you're on stage, depending on the organization and the system, you want to keep your answers between 20 and 30 seconds. So it has to be concise and short, sweet, and to the point. But your answer still has to have some substance to it. So had I said I would decline to answer, like, that's not a good answer, and it's really awkward. But if I really just was stuck on that, I declined to answer, I would say, well, I would decline to answer because although as the title holder, I'm very sensitive to the issues of my community, I am more focused on insert platform and insert how that is helping the community and making change in its own way, in its own right. That answer has a little more substance to it, and it's backing up why you're saying what you're saying and why you feel the way you feel, because you're never going to be judged on how you feel, but it's all about how you present it, and I just didn't do it well. But as you can see, I've gotten better, and that's all that it's about. Sometimes you really got to mess up at the beginning. And I'm hoping that when you're watching this, you know that you do not have to make these mistakes. Please do better. But you can learn from my embarrassment and use it to your advantage. That's just, it is what it is, and that's fine. Moving on to talent. Being a competitive dancer growing up, I had a bunch of solos that I've done in the past, and I had a bunch of costumes just laying around. So I chose a costume and a dance that still fit, and that I thought would be appropriate, and made sure it was 90 seconds. Talent has to be 90 seconds for Miss America organization. So that was pretty easy and it didn't cost me any money because I still had a lot of my dance gear, like tights and everything. Of course, you want to make sure that you have 2 of everything, including shoes. If you're a dancer, you want to have 2 pairs of shoes. You want to have at least 3 pairs of tights, because runs happen, especially because things are moving so fast and you're trying to pull up your tights quickly. You might get a run. Have 3 pairs at least. Earrings, have those things ready, Being organized, that's not one of my shortcomings, because I pride myself on just being so organized, and it just makes it so much easier when you're in a stressful environment that you can, I open this compartment and my earrings are here, I open this compartment and the wipes are here and the hand sanitizer and the makeup is here. You want to be organized, and I'm telling you, it's going to take more than a week to be fully organized. I was bare minimum organized, but I made it work, and I did better next time. My talent, it went well. I had nerves, of course. And from my on-stage question, I realized that, I was kind of psyching myself out. And if you're a performer, you know that once you psych yourself out and it's still showtime, it's kind of hard to get yourself back into your groove if you don't know how. So at that moment, I didn't know how. And now I know how, and maybe we can talk about that another time. But at the time, I didn't know what to do, and I was like, but I have to do this. So I was so upset for my own stage question. I'm crying, putting on my tights, I'm naked, crying, and people are like, oh my gosh, do you need a tissue? We don't know where to hug you because you're naked, and it was just bad. But I was like, I gotta finish this. So I'm being defeated, but I'm learning as I'm going still, but that was a doozy. So I did my talent, and I wore the evening gown, and all is well, but I just made some mistakes earlier in the show and in the day that were just kind of hard to recover from. So how it worked in this system is if there is under a certain amount of people competing and you're giving out more than one crown, so that means like 2 or 3 or however many, then there's a winner crowned, and then everyone else has to recompete for the second crown. So that means that, the first winner is crowned, and everyone who didn't win that title has to recompete the entire pageant. That means the on-stage question, their talent, in their evening gown, all over again in hopes of obtaining the second crown or the third crown or whatever. So it's already tiring competing one time, right? So, but you gotta do it again, and you gotta come harder than you did before because you really want it, right? You gotta get your mind right somehow. And again, the nerves are kicking, and I was like, oh my goodness, like I'm hopeless. I'm really I'm losing right now. I'm losing. But I was like, I have to pull myself together and get through this. So I did my dance again, and I did it better than I did the first time, and I think that helped me, but I just ended up not placing at that pageant, and that's okay because I met so many new people. People also noticed my dancing skills. They noticed that I was a stellar dancer, and that's when I was mentioning earlier, knowing your qualifying talents, your qualifying skills, what it may be. Just knowing what you bring to the table and makes you special, people will notice that, and you will shine regardless. So a lot of people came up to me afterwards and like, wow, you're such a great dancer, please don't stop competing. And one, that helped me see okay, I think I'm in the right organization because I have a talent and I want to highlight it. And that's the great thing about the Miss America organization and Miss Virginia. It's just that if you have a talent, if you have something you're passionate about and you want to pursue, you can do that in the pageant, in the competition. Whereas if you might not want to showcase your talent or showcase what you think you're passionate about, what have you, then you can do another pageant competition and do it there. So it's all about what is going to make you feel like you are showcasing your best self. And I really didn't realize that until I competed in this local that, even though I didn't win this competition, I'm right where I need to be. And I'm gonna go hard and be a beast, and I am gonna win eventually. And not after the second competition, I got first runner-up. But at the third competition, they were giving away 3 crowns. It was a triple crowning. I didn't win the first crown. I didn't win the second crown. Lo and behold, I won the third crown. And that proved to me that anything is possible as long as you work for it. And in a subsequent video, I'm going to talk about everything that I changed to just do better and that I thought would be needed to excel in that competition, because not many times do you really get feedback from the judges or you get a score sheet or anything. So it's up to just kind of doing some research, asking people who you trust questions, and trying to just do what's best for you and makes you confident, and also staying engaged, publicly and politically, and anything that's just going on in your climate and your environment, you want to know about it, or at least have your ear out to the streets and just hear what's going on around you, so that you're just aware, and not only your community, but in your state, in your country, and in your world, because it all matters. And what you're doing in your community ultimately affects your world. So that's something to keep in mind. But yes, that was my pageant, my first ever pageant that I did as a grown woman. And I say this as a grown woman part because it's never too late. The oldest that you can be to compete for Miss America is 24. I would suggest getting started, as soon as you feel like this is something that you want to do and could see yourself doing. However, if you wake up and you're like, you know what, I did, life is too short to not go after whatever you thought you couldn't do because you told yourself you couldn't do it, and this happens to be one of those things, or really anything, please go after it. And please just write it down, because when you write stuff down, it becomes more real. Once you write it down, just list one step that you can to get closer to it. That's it. That's all you have to do. For so long, I was like, I want to be a better dancer. I saw all these people on Instagram doing crazy legs, turns, and pirouettes, combinations, and all this stuff, and I said, I want to do that. And I wrote it down. And I said, okay, here's what I need to do. Wake up and go for a jog so that my muscles are warm and I can stretch. do that. Just get in the habit of doing that. Like, it's really just one thing. It's all about just, I say this, like taking one right step. Because how many times have you heard someone say, oh, it's just one wrong decision and you ruin your life? Well, all it takes is one right decision, one time you tell yourself, you know what? I can do this. I am capable of this. If I work hard for this, I can have it and it will be mine. That's one right step in the right direction, and that could change your life. You never know. So with that being said, thanks so much for tuning in. I cannot wait to talk with you next time. Remember, stay extraordinary. Talk to you soon. Bye.